Hello, dreamers and thinkers, and welcome to episode 1 of Identity in the Diaspora. Guys, when I tell you I have tried recording this episode so many times, I hope that this is the one that finally makes it onto the internet. I really do, because I've tried recording this at least 5 times and I always find something to dislike. But here we are, making the decision that this will be the one that I post. First of all, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much to everyone who has liked the Instagram posts, who has followed the Instagram, who has shared the Instagram page, who has sent really lovely messages. I am so grateful for all your love and support, and I'm overwhelmed. I just want to say thank you so much. So before we get into the podcast, I have decided that on every episode that I do by myself, I will share a piece of writing that either I have written myself or that I have found on the internet that relates to that day's topic. For today's episode, I will be sharing something that I wrote back in 2018. Now, when I say I write, I use that term very loosely. Like, sometimes it can sound like a poem, and I say like a poem, not like an actual poem, but it sounds like a poem. Other times it's really just thoughts in my notes or in my journal. Anyway, so this is something that I wrote back in 2018, and it goes a little something like this. And some days I feel homesick for a country I don't remember living in, but feel so deeply connected to, the life of a first-generation immigrant. So with that, we will segue, I don't know what it is, into a little bit about my life story. So I was born in Zimbabwe, and when I was about 3 or 4 years old, we moved to England. And then we lived there until I was about 11. And then from there, we moved to Australia. In the intro episode, I mentioned the term third culture kids. And up until a few months ago, I genuinely had never heard of this term. I didn't know what it meant. But after a quick Google search, I realized that it managed to put words and describe a feeling that I had always felt but never quite knew how to voice or express. So I'm going to give you guys the definition. The term TCK, or third culture kid, was originally used to describe the experiences of those who live between two cultures, specifically between Western and non-Western. And then I continued to do a little bit more research, and I'm just going to share some things that I found in the literature that I really liked. One culture is passed down from their parents, in brackets, home country, one from the culture they are living in brackets, host country, and the third culture as a combination of both these cultures and the lifestyle of the expatriate community. This has also been described as the neither nor world, meaning the TCK is neither fully immersed in the world of their parents' cultures nor fully in the world of the other cultures that they were raised in. And if that is not relatable, I don't know what to tell you. Just reading all of that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. There are people who get it, and they've done literature. It was really great. Okay, so in my case, even though I moved to England at a young age, I never would have described myself as British. Even to this day, I wouldn't fully describe myself as Australian either. In my mind, I was and am Zimbabwean, and that was my identity. That is where it stemmed from. And I think a big part of that had to do with the fact that in as much as I was submerged in British or Australian culture, when I went home, it was Zimbabwe. From the meals we ate, to the language that was spoken around the house sometimes, to our family culture, to some of the stories and all that kind of stuff that was shared in my house, they were rooted in my Zimbabwean origin. And I think what also helped as well at that age was the fact that I went to a super multicultural school in England. So there wasn't a distinct British culture floating around. Everyone came from all different places, and no one really stood out or was more different than the other. We were all kind of just learning about each other's cultures and languages and heritage. As well as the fact that when I lived in England, majority of, maybe not majority, but a large portion of my family actually lives in England, and we all lived really close to each other. So in as much as we weren't in Zimbabwe, because of how close we were and how our family functioned, it functioned in the same way that it would have functioned if we lived in Zimbabwe. We went to the same school, we did carpooling together, we did picnics, we hung out, we did birthdays, Christmas, you name it, we were one big family. And so at that age where your identity is rooted in your family, I had a lot of stability and never really any confusion around it because of that setup of things. And then we fast forward to moving to Australia. So we moved to Australia when I was about 11. Yeah, I was about 10, 11. And at this stage, this is when most children are starting to find their identity outside of their family. So this is when most kids start to rebel, that kind of stuff. And this is when we moved to Australia. Just want to just throw that in the mix as if I didn't have enough going on. And so that was a really confusing time. And I always say to people that I didn't realize I was Black until I came here, which is like, it's just me being cheeky. But I guess what I mean is that we moved to Australia 11 years ago to a regional town, which basically means that it wasn't super multicultural. So I was the Black girl with the British accent, which is like I did not blend in at all, even if I tried. And so that was a really confusing time, and I didn't know who I was. I don't think anyone would expect an 11-year-old to know who they are, but I was now having to be like the spokesperson for all African and British people, which was just like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know what to tell you about a whole race of people. And so I guess from having to navigate those different seasons of my life and even up to where I am now, I have kind of come up with like 5 lessons that I learned along my journey of figuring out my identity. And this isn't to say that I have fully figured it out, because I don't believe that's the case at all. I believe it's a journey that we continue to go on. But these are just the 5 lessons that I've learnt up until now that have been super helpful for me. Lesson number 1, don't put yourself in a box. Don't feel like you can't be one thing because you're another. Your personality is allowed to be fluid. And I'm just going to say that once more because someone needs to hear that and let it set them free. Do not put yourself in a box. Don't feel like you can't be one thing because you're another. Your personality is allowed to be fluid. And I think the biggest part for TCKs is when you try to fully submerge yourself into the culture of the country where you're growing up, because your parents don't completely get that. They can't understand that because that's not what they've grown up in. That's not what they've known. And that may not be what they have raised you as. And so there becomes like a tension when you're fully submerged in this culture, but that's different to what your parents have taught you. And I think I will always brag on my parents. I think they're amazing parents. And I think they did such an amazing job in that they gave me boundaries and allowed me to work within those boundaries, as well as just having conversations with me. We had conversations about Zimbabwe and Zimbabwean culture, and that was amazing because I got to have insight into that because I wasn't growing in that and I wasn't able to see that, but I was able to learn from their experiences and their stories. And from that, I was, as well as just like, observing the people around us, I was able to see what I liked and maybe didn't like about Zimbabwean culture. And the same goes with Western culture because I was fully saturated in that outside of my house. I was able to see what I liked and didn't like about Western culture. And from there, I was able to pick which from the 2 cultures that I liked And if I liked it and I felt like, and I say this about a lot of things, and if I felt like this was going to serve the life that I was trying to live moving forward, then I was going to take it and I was going to put it in my toolbox and keep it going. If I felt like it didn't serve the life I was trying to live, or it just wasn't beneficial in life generally, then I would leave it behind. And I think that's the beauty of being a TCK, is that you are exposed to different cultures and you get to pick what works for you and move with that. The second question, the second lesson was, your parents are human and struggling too. And this was such a game changer for me, because when I realized just how difficult it would have been for my parents to leave Zimbabwe, which was all they knew, which was comfortable, which was familiar, which is where their family was, to leave that and to move to England, where everything was new. They didn't know as many people. The culture was new to them. They seemed strange to other people. That would have been really difficult and scary, and they still did it, and they did it because they had our family's best interest at heart. And so I just think, like, I am in awe that they were able to even go on that journey themselves of being able to find their identity within the context of a new culture, as well as just like the conversations that we'd have helped me gain insight into why my parents maybe did certain things the way that they did them. And that just has a lot to that was based on their upbringing and events that had occurred in their lives. The numerous conversations we had about their childhood and the situation surrounding my birth, their marriage, leaving Zimbabwe, all of that, it just gave me so much more clarity. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like, you guys are heroes that you would do this for me. And I just think there have been times where I've seen a lot of TCKs who get really frustrated and maybe angry at their parents for not understanding or being rigid. And I just think, like, they're doing the best with what they have, and you need to release them from this unrealistic expectation that parents are supposed to be perfect and all-knowing, because they are not. They are there to guide you through life while they figure out life at the same time. Like, I remember when I turned 21, my mum had me at 21. And so turning 21, I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe you were caring for another life. You were having to walk someone else through life at this age. Like, I can barely get myself through life, and you were walking me through life. Like, that's insane. And so, yeah, I just feel like it would do us a lot if we extended grace to our parents and just forgave them for being human and not always getting it right. The third lesson I learnt was, make decisions for you, not for your friends or parents. And I think this is a big one, because sometimes it's really easy to do things to please our parents and just keep the peace, or to do things that our friends are saying to fit in and keep the peace there and seem cool, or whatever the case may be. And I've never been cool. So for me, it was never difficult to not fall into peer pressure and all that kind of stuff. I didn't do that. But I think sometimes we can live for the opinions of others. And I just stopped doing that a long time ago. I refuse to betray myself by making a decision based on someone else's opinion. And that's what it is. Like, you know how you feel on the inside. You know what you want to do, but you're choosing otherwise. And it's self-betrayal. And in particular to like situations with my parents, there have been times where we have had a difference of opinion about decisions regarding my life. And I've had to explain where I'm coming from and listen to what they had to say. Address their fears, but still stay true to me. And I think that's really important with any conversation you go into, to go into it with listening ears, not to listen to have a defense ready to go, but to listen to understand. And in that, you can just never go wrong, because you're listening to understand. You're making the other person feel heard. And so that was a really big thing for conversations I had with my parents where we disagreed, was that I was listening to understand their point of view and where they were coming from. But at the same time, I still stood strong in what I believed and what I wanted to do. I just believe at the end of the day, God is going to ask what I did with my life. He's not going to ask what decisions I made based on someone else's opinion or whatever the case is. He's going to ask what I did with my life, and I have to take account for that. And I want to be able to say I lived it for him, and I was not afraid of other people's opinions, because at the end of the day, even when you're on your deathbed, you're going to look back and you're going to regret the times you didn't do something that you wanted to do because you were scared of what other people thought of you. It is not worth it, let me tell you that. And then the fourth lesson I learned was, you are still, and then insert whatever your country of heritage is. And I think this one is really strongly connected to reverse culture shock, which is defined as the emotional and psychological distress suffered by some people when they return home after a number of years overseas. And guys, when I tell you this was me the first time I went back to Zimbabwe, it was so overwhelming, and it was so, I think, painful at the same time, because I felt at home, but at the same time I felt like I didn't fit. You know, you get excited, you're going and you're thinking, okay, this is going to be great. I look like everyone. I can speak the language enough to get by. But then you get there and you just realize that your accent, the way you act, the clothes you wear, all that kind of stuff makes you stick out. And that just makes it that much harder. But I have just over the years learned to realize that I am still Zimbabwean, in spite of the fact that me being Zimbabwean looks a little different to someone else who lives in Zimbabwe looks like. I am still Zimbabwean. And I think I think moments like that are beautiful, and you should enjoy the position of humility that you are put in, because now you are able to learn and submerge yourself. Instead of maybe being at the forefront of the conversation or being the loudest or whatever the case might be, you actually just get to take a step back and just watch and observe and learn and ask questions. Be curious. And I think, if anything, these moments are so crucial for figuring out the jigsaw puzzle that is a TCK's identity. And then the fifth and final lesson is, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth it. Walking this out isn't always fun, and sometimes it's just so much easier to give up and either let your parents or your friends dictate who you are, or just society, just kind of throw it to the wind and be like, what will be, will be. But for me personally, I am now at a place where I'm comfortable with the idea of being a Rubik's Cube. Multifaceted, and each facet a distinctly individual color to the other. This blending of cultures means I have quite a peculiar outlook on life, and I'm really okay with that. That is the beauty of being a TCK or an immigrant child or whatever you want to call it, is that you have been exposed to so much, that you have so many different facets and so many different interesting things about you, and that has shaped the way that you view the world and the way that you process the world. And that is interesting, and that is worth being heard, and that is worth expressing to other people. I do believe, though, that the hardest part in all of this, for me personally, was the guilt I felt. I just felt like I was diluting my Africanness, which in hindsight was such a heavy thing to have to carry around. And I think what I know now, I would say that there is an element of dilution, but not in the sense of when you mix cordial and water, but more like when you make a fruit punch. You're just adding another juice that complements the other and enhances the taste of the drink. Yeah, with that, this concludes the first episode of this series. I'm so excited for you guys to hear the other episodes. We've already recorded episode 2 and 3, and I know you're going to love them. You're going to take so much from them. Episode 2, I will be interviewing my 2 amazing friends, and they have so much to share, and we just had so much fun recording it, so I can't wait for you guys to hear that one. But please feel free to let me know what your favorite part about this episode was, your own experiences, and what was difficult for you, maybe some lessons that you've learned. Let's turn this into a dialogue and see where people have similarities and what interesting lessons that they have learned. And so I just want to say thank you so much for listening, and feel free to share this on your social medias, wherever you want. I'll see you next time. Bye.